I have a special guest with me today, Harper Guerra. She is the girl when it comes to goals and growth mindset. And she's going to share a little bit about her story today, and you'll see why. Actually, I think it was in New Directors Conference, which was like our first trip you could earn back in the day in Shackley, was where I met you.
Yeah.
And you actually did a training on goals, and you weren't a girl who did goals and all of that. But before we jump to that, I just wanted to share a little bit about Harper so you know where she's coming from. And so Harper's been in this business. We were just talking about this before we hit record. She's been in business officially for 18 years, but next level serious about 13 years ago. She's at the top of the company, and what I love about Harper is the way that she does business, and it's truly about integrity, about serving, about helping moms to be able to have a way to create income. And I know just from being connected to different people on her team, people use their businesses to fuel income for other things in their life. I know that's kind of the theme with your team, right? Like, because, there were some like income limitations for people on your team, and like their Shackley business allowed them to be able to do that. Like, yeah, so we'll get into all that later. But Harper lives in Tennessee. She used to live in Illinois, and I'm so sad she moved out of Illinois before we could hang out, but that's okay. You have 3 kids, and you and Ryan live in Tennessee, as I said. And how long have you guys been there now? Has it been like
4 years.
4 years.
4 years
Okay.
yesterday.
4 years yesterday. Wow, that's awesome. And actually, I'm going to come and see you in September. Yeah.
So fun.
I know, so fun. So because this is really a podcast about growth, and people are here because they're really working to increase their capacity on thinking. I would love to just ask you, what is your take on a growth mindset? Like, what do you think is the most important thing? And we'll just lead off with that.
I think when you're talking about a growth mindset, I think the idea is that we're always moving forward, but we're never going to reach the destination. Like, a writer that I like talks about it in such a way where he says it's like you're climbing a mountain. You're never going to get to the top, but the view just keeps getting better. And so a growth mindset has to be functional in a way that, like, there isn't an end. And depending on your personality, that can be really hard. The hardest part of having learning to have a growth mindset for me was that there wasn't a finish. I'm an Enneagram 1. I like to finish and check the box. And that was the biggest thing about really understanding a growth mindset. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to grow this much and then I'm going to be done. And like, it was really this constant. So I love that visual of like, you're climbing a mountain and the view just keeps getting better and better, but you're never going to get to the top. But it's still worth growing because the view, or still worth going because the view is just going to keep getting better. And so I think that is a really important piece of it. And this piece that realizing that I'm very passionate about women who their priority is home, but they want to make an impact and a contribution outside of home. And what I love about a business, that it can help you shift to a growth mindset, which then benefits you in every aspect. Your growth mindset isn't like when you learn to have a growth mindset because you have a business, it develops you into a growth mindset in all the areas of your life.
I love that. That's so true, though. It does. Like, if you grow, it's all the boats rising with the tide, right? The tide comes in, all the boats rise. So when you grow your mindset in one area of your life, all the boats, like your health and your relationships and all of those things, they all start to rise as well. I love that. I love what you said about just the view keeps getting better. I think that when we think of like goals, we think of like baking a cake, right? Like, we have our end result in mind, but you would never bake a cake and take it out every 5 seconds and put new ingredients in. Like, it would be a total disaster. And so, like, for some reason, I'm thinking like that is really the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is like baking a cake. We put in very specific ingredients in very specific amounts. We bake it at a temperature for a certain amount of time, and out comes a beautiful cake. Not mine. I'm not a good baker. I'm a little too like flexible and, you know, however you feel, garlic cloves, right? Like that's me. But when we talk about like growth mindset, like we are constantly we're pulling the cake out. We're, you know, maybe taking some things out, putting some other things in. We're looking at it from different angles. We're still continuing to move forward, like you said, and we get to see, you know, progress along the way through that process. But we don't really have that end result cake, right? Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So tell me, goals. You said that's the first thing I ever heard you say in that training was, I don't do goals.
It's hilarious because that is so meaningful to me, because if you would have said, I'm like, I vaguely remember that I spoke at that event.
That's
like,
so funny because that's like so distinct in my brain.
I love that. And so that is so powerful to me that made such a difference. So yes, I was very much, I don't do goals. And there was a couple of reasons for that. One was because there's a big difference between the idea of like, I am just going to put what I want out into the universe and it will just happen. I'm just going to put it out there. You know, like The Secret was big back then. Like, just put what you want and it will come to be. And as a woman of faith and like that, no, that's not how it works. And so I went a pendulum swing in the opposite direction of like, I don't even do goals. And I'm definitely naturally present minded. I know you're future minded, but like I'm naturally present minded. So that was an easy thing for me to just be like, like, no, I don't do that. I don't participate in this, like, put it into the universe thing. Because in my impression, that was what goals were. And so I had to learn that my understanding was wrong. I had to learn that my definitions were not true. And I had to learn that my preconceived notions about something were from falsehood. And so I had to make that shift. And I think being able to, that is like the epitome of a growth mindset, is being able to take the things that you were so sure about and think that maybe, I mean, obviously other than biblical truth, we're not talking about that, but I'm saying like,
we're not dismantling those things.
No. But I'm saying like in terms of like, what does it mean to set goals? Being able to say, okay, maybe I was wrong about this. And so somebody spoke at that event and he talked about how, and this is what clinched it for me, was that God designed the brain to move towards goals. Like the synapses in our brain connect when you set specific goals. And I was like, well, that makes sense, because if I set goals, then I'm going to know what activities I need to do to reach the goal. And I'm not saying that if I set this goal, that then that is what is going to happen. But I'm setting this goal so that I know where I'm going. Because if we don't have and it's different than a vision for sure, which I had to learn over time, like my vision for what I want my life to look like we have to have that. Do we have contentment? Does man make his plans and God directs his steps? Yes and amen. But that doesn't mean that we just flounder around just waiting. I read this my favorite devotional is New Morning Mercies by Paul Tripp. And he talks about this idea of like, you can't do the things that only God can do, but you also can't just expect God to do the things that he's calling you to do. That there's this big difference between the two. And it was said in a way that I appreciated so much. But so it wasn't this idea that, that if I set, this is what I want my life to look like, and these are my goals, that was like, now sign off on this, God, make this come to pass. But it was helping me choose to be intentional with my life, with my hours, with my minutes, with my mental energy, with my physical energy. When I had those goals, I knew where I was going. It's like if we moved to a new town 4 years ago. If I was just like, I'm going to drive around, hopefully I'll find a store. Like, that's not effective. Like, if I need groceries and I want groceries, I need to figure out where is the grocery store, and then I need to figure out how am I going to get there. But if I don't even know where the grocery store is, then I'm not even going to be able to create a roadmap to get there. And so really
Mm,
shifting that mindset to understand that God designed our brains to go in a direction. And that's why people are more successful, even in something like, running, like saying, this
mhm,
is my specific goal, because then they know what to do. Like, I just want to run more. They may or may not run more because they don't know exactly what they're doing. Or people who say, I want to lose weight, or I want to lose 15 pounds, have very different results because God designed our brains to move in the direction. And that doesn't mean
mhm,
you can't close doors along the way, but you know. So I guess that would be
mhm,
the big transformation for me was understanding the purpose of goals and how they fit into my faith, but how important they really are. And not only goals, but the vision that the goals lead to. Like being able to
mhm,
say, this is how I want our life to look. This is how I want the kind of freedom that I want us to have. This is the kind of time I want us to be able to invest in our family. I like, we definitely, in terms of business, have always felt like, and this was a part of that turning point, was we want to be able to do the things that we feel called to do and not just what
mhm.
we have to do. And
Right.
that is where that financial piece comes into play, because when we feel called to do something, we don't have to deal with the financial piece of like, well, but I have to do this. And so that is a huge piece of that, and being able to set ourselves up and help set up other people to be able to make those kind of choices based on how they feel God is calling them.
I love that. Well, and I'm glad that you brought up the financial piece of it, because what you may not know is I've been sharing a lot about my own money mindset journey, and it's been so much of what you just said. It was this honestly coming to a point of getting really honest with myself of like, well, what are my beliefs around money or business? And essentially dismantling those and then relearning. So there's an unlearning and a relearning, or a new learning, of what it actually means, because it is that called to and not have to. And I mean, if you looked at the numbers now of society and middle class, right? Like, it's the heaviest percentage of people are living in the have to, right? They have to go to work because they have kids that they have to feed. They have
Mhm.
a house that they have to pay for, right? Like, we
Mhm.
have all these things that we have to do, right? But do we? I don't know. Because that's where, like, that designing your own life, and I mean, not really designing our life, but allowing God to, direct that. And I would say this is probably true for you too. Like, I went through a process of God essentially waking me up, shaking me, breaking me of my own pride in certain things, of like, for my own success, my own self-reliance, basically me sitting on his throne and trying to take his glory, and has led me and like remade me to a place of, now it's like I can still do all those things that I was doing, like putting legs on that prayer, but
Mhm.
it's not for my own glory, right? Like, I'm not creating this life or this business or this income or setting these goals so that, look at me, right? It's
Right.
about time with your family, how
Yes.
you want it to look, right? Like,
Right.
how we feel God has called us to, like, if we're stuck in our school and our jobs and all these things and sports, good grief, right? Like, where's the margin?
Right.
Right? Where's the margin to be able to serve when God opens a door or closes a door? And I know you've talked a lot about margin in the past. What do you think is the biggest thing about margin, um, that people need to understand?
Are you talking, I mean, like, that's a big question. Are you talking about financial margin? Are you talking about time margin? Are you talking about
um,
emotional margin? Mental margin? I mean, there's lots of margins.
yeah, right. You're right. There are lots of
Tell me
margins.
what direction you want me to go.
Let's talk about margins in general, as in, because my audience, they understand we have resources, right? We have time, which is not a renewable resource.
Right.
We have energy and finances, which are renewable resources. So when it comes to margin for our resources, what do you think is, that's really big and vague. So you
It's
dive right in and go
big
whatever
and
direction
vague.
you want to go, Harper.
I think that starting with the financial margin, I think that's exactly
Mhm.
what we're talking about, because it isn't
Right.
about, and I think that obviously God can use finances in any way, but
Right.
again, there's a big difference between building finances for our glory and for the desire to be able to spend more time with your family. Like to be able to choose a job that doesn't
Mhm.
require travel. But that also means sometimes for people that means they have to have margin in their spending. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it's not just I need to make more income so that I can do the things I want to do. It's I need to create more margin in my budget so that we're spending less so that we can make this choice. It goes both ways. But,
Mhm.
my husband spent, before he was in ministry, he spent, 20 years in the financial, like investment advisory for families. And the biggest thing that he ran into was that, like, there was this small gap that made such a big difference. This small
Mhm.
gap of like $500 that kept people from being in the black. And
Mhm.
that caused so much stress, so much marital strife. And so, but being able to say, I can create that income to take that, difficulty off. So so that if we don't have this tension, but I also am going to choose to be more content and change the way we budget and make margin this way also. So there's margin from both
Mhm.
sides, and it's just continuing to make those choices. But the same is so that you're in a position where whether it's like we want to help this need that came up, we
Mhm.
have the capability to, or like all right, there's this other thing that that we need to do to like make enough money to cover our bills, but that doesn't fit with our family values. Well, then we can say no. And so again, it gives the flexibility on both ends of whether it's something that you don't feel like you want to do or you feel like you do want to do, having that margin. But the same is true
Mhm.
with time. So it's both and. It's like, what am I going to say yes to and what am I going to say no to? Because it has to be both things to create that margin. But it's really hard to create margin without a goal. Because if you
Mhm.
don't have a goal, if you don't have a financial goal of, and not that it has to be like, I want to make this much money every month, but whether it's paying off debt
Right.
or how much you want to save every month or whatever it is, if you don't have a goal, it's hard to create margin because you don't know where to draw the lines. Same with your time. If you don't have a goal of what you want your time to be for, a vision for how you
Mhm.
want your time to be spent, then it's really hard to set those boundaries and to set those margins because you don't know what you're doing it for. And we live in a
Mhm.
world that doesn't want us to set any margins. Like everything in our society is taking away all the margins. And so
Yeah.
it's work to do it. It's fighting against the tide or whatever, the
Current,
river,
flow,
current, the
something.
current. It's
The current.
the current to set any kind of margin.
Right.
Um, And so, you can't, it's really hard to do that if you don't have a goal and you don't have a
Mhm.
reason that you're doing it. You don't have a vision for what you want that to look like.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. I love that you said it has to be intentional, that you have to have a direction, um, and also that it is fighting against the normal way of thinking in our world, right? It's, how can we be as quick as possible to fit as much in and, spend as much as we possibly can without going in the red too much or in the black too
Right.
much. And honestly, now that financial margin is probably more like 1,000 or more. I mean, with the way prices are going.
Yeah, very true.
Right? Um, yeah, I think, oh gosh, I just feel like there's so much more we could talk about on that topic.
Well, you're
Right?
in charge. You get to
I
choose.
know, I know. I like to just let the Holy Spirit like lead us where we go. But one thing what you were talking about, is like we're talking about our actions, right? We're talking about our thinking and like our direction, our plans, all of that. And one thing that I teach is this idea of be, do, have, because what we think creates our emotions, which then drives the things we do or don't do, right? So when it comes to like becoming, embodying this person who creates margin, who prioritizes things that maybe the world doesn't necessarily prioritize, um, what's been most helpful for you in that process for yourself of becoming Harper version today versus Harper 18 or 13 years ago?
I mean, in all reality, it really is a process of allowing the Lord to mold you. Is
Mm,
like that just is the reality,
mm-hmm,
because it's being in the word, it's being in prayer, it's being humble enough to see the places that you need to grow. But I
mm,
think all of that comes from pursuing the things of the Lord, that because the because if we go back to, and I've always used that phraseology too, but the person that I want to be isn't like the most successful businesswoman. Like, that's not who I want to be um as a
I
whole.
would
But I
say
want
to most,
what?
you are that. I would think to a lot, you are that.
That's not the person.
Right.
That is a role that I seek to do the
Mhm.
best that I possibly can. But my be is to be a woman of humility and integrity and passion and
Mhm.
encouragement and these kind of things. And so
Mhm.
if we're seeking the character, then
Mhm.
that again is going to translate into all of these pieces of life, but it shifts the way that we show up. But again, in all areas of life. And so if you look at, but it's about growth, and it is about growth, but it has to be, like you said earlier, in the Lord's strength. So I can't just like will myself to be a better leader, but I have to, in humility, seek to learn to be a better leader. But even if I pursue reading books on being a better leader in my business and seek counsel, I still have to do that in the Lord's strength. But I also have to look at the book
Mhm.
of Proverbs. Like, you look at the book of Proverbs and it is full of wisdom, and it tells us to seek counsel. So you seek counsel and you
Mhm.
seek humility, and um you know what I'm saying? And so I think
Mhm.
that it's really a bigger B
Mhm.
than, I want to be someone who influences people for the positive. I want to be someone who
Mhm.
people are better off knowing than not knowing. And so even the fact that you're like,
Mhm.
you said this, however many, what was that, 2017?
Yes, I think so.
Like you gave this talk and it really impacted me. Well, like that is who I want to be, not because I was asked to come speak somewhere, but because the words that I said made
Mhm.
a positive impact for you in the things that God is calling you to do. And
Mhm.
so be the person that I want to be isn't a title or a
Mhm.
status or a rank or an income level, but the person I want to be, you know, God has taken that and used it in these things. And like, but I want to be a person who is dependable. I want to be a person that can help others. I want to be a person that can help others create what I've created because I've seen how much it's changed my life. So when I look at, for example, the leadership role that I have in my business, I look at like, this has, for the last decade, has tremendously been used by God to bless our life, to create opportunities, to help transform me into a better person in all walks of life. And I want to be the kind of person who can help people do the same. And so when we are motivated by a bigger B than a title or a rank, like, do I have goals in my business? Yes, I do. But that's not who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Right.
that make
That's not
any
what,
sense at all?
yes. Oh, no,
Okay.
absolutely. Okay. So it's just so, I mean, this is how the Holy Spirit works. But I just recorded another podcast episode before we hopped on here. And I was talking about, 3 things I would do if I was struggling with an area in my business, which, I shared the example of converting to sales, like actually closing the deal, right? Because I think that that's probably one of the biggest, aside from connecting with new people once your warm market dries up. But I talked about, I would go read books. I would go pick 2 to 3 books on the topic of how to be a better salesperson, how to close sales, right? All those things, like to learn that skill. But the second one is counsel, right? To get around people who are really good at the things or who are embodying the person that you want to be, and learn from them, right? To be curious, to go sit at their table at the new directors conference and have dinner. Learn from them. That was me. Okay. What's so funny about that is I don't think anyone else that sat at that table is still around, which is sad, but we're still here. Right? We're still here doing our thing. But yeah, and and like the last one is like to just invest in your learning, right? And your growing and taking that responsibility that it's not about those dangling carrots. It's not about those titles or those identities. It's about the actual who I'm becoming in the process. And I would say that and from listening to you, that's what drives and informs all of your behaviors, right? Like, I'm sure you have days, Harper, where you're like, I literally don't want to do anything today. I don't want to follow up with customers. I don't want to do any of those things. I just don't. I don't feel like it, right? But, I mean, do you say to yourself, I'm someone who impacts people's lives and helps people? And like, is there anything like that you do where you bring it back to who it is that you are that informs why you're doing what you're doing on those hard days?
I'd like to say that that's always how I am, that I'm like you. Tell truth to yourself.
Sure. Okay.
I would say that's it's a place to come back to, because in the reality of a busy life, when you are prioritizing home and making an impact outside of the home, it's going to be hard to come back to that. But here's the thing. If there is no margin, there is no play. If there's no margin in your brain space and your time, then it's going to be really hard to come back to that. So sometimes it's just like, ooh, like that day, like I didn't get to that stuff because for me, it's usually more of a, like, something else came up. Like or I had like left no margin and like this took longer than that. And then this thing that I was supposed to do yesterday didn't get done. And so I'm holding on to it. And so again, but the day just goes and goes, and it's not like I have all this margin. So it's when I create the margin, because only when I create the margin. So like I was struggling for a while, just feeling like not productive. So I started making a list of the things I accomplished at the end of the day to help. And then I could reflect on that. I'd be like, okay, but this was good, but this isn't what I wanted to accomplish. So how do I reflect on that tomorrow? It's something that I've spent a lot of time in my morning prayer time. Like there is for women of faith, I think this is so important. There is a quote by Martin Luther. Yes. Mm, yes, I think so. Anyway, he says that I have so much to do today that I will spend the first 3 hours in prayer. And
Mm,
D.L. Moody has a quote where he talks about if you have so much to do today that you do not have time to pray, you have more going on than God ever intended you to have.
mm,
And so I think that if we don't create the margin to
mhm,
get back to what is true, we're always going to be in a place where we're struggling with that because
mhm,
and for women who aren't a faith, like even just having some time in the morning to put their mind in a place where they can think about what they're going to focus on for the day, but really being able to say those things and say them in prayer, because like a prayer I pray a lot. Most of my like affirmations are in fact prayers because they're not about
mhm.
like I am amazing. It's not that. It's not like it's it's
You are, but
it's
I
it's
totally get that.
it's you know, okay, like I will pray this often and for many years. Like, okay, God created the week with 7 days and the day with 24 hours. And
Mhm,
he gave me the callings that I have. And he promises in his word in the book of James that he will give me wisdom if I ask. So I'm
mhm,
asking for wisdom to how to use my time today.
mhm,
And like these, like, and even just like, okay, so I'm going to take a post-it note and I'm going to write down the top 3 things that I need to make sure to accomplish today. Like, but in thoughtfulness, because I want to be wise, not in my own eyes, but because I'm asking God for wisdom to how to use my time. And when I
mhm,
feel frustrated, like, Lord, I feel so frustrated. I wanted to do these things and life keeps happening and I need to have a different perspective because this isn't helping. Because being like isn't who I want to be. So I have to be able to say what is important today, what is not important today, and how am I going to show up? Because the worst thing is when I don't get, whether it's like the kitchen cleanup or thank you notes to clients or whatever it is. If I do not get things done and then I show up in my family like that's not like, then why did I even show up there? I should just go do the
right.
thing because they aren't being blessed by their time with me. And that's not how I'm going to show up. So I have to work hard at
Mhm,
that in those transitions when I come out of my office or I come out of the laundry room and things are not done again, because I'm an Enneagram 1, like I have to go back to that. But again, if I don't have any margin, it's really hard to think through those things. And so I think that's where, as women
mhm,
who are handling both parts of their life, that we tend to not have a lot of margin. And so you may
mhm,
not be able to create margin in the middle of the day, or like I'm always working on transitions. Like when we're done with this, I'm going to go out of my office and I'm going to have to
right,
transition and not go out there and be like, you didn't get this done and you didn't get that done and you were supposed to do this, because that is like, because I'm in
right.
task mode from working, right?
Mhm,
That's really hard because that's not who I want to be, but that's how I show up a lot of times. And
mhm,
so I have to transition that piece of in all aspects. But again, we can't do that if we don't have margin.
mhm. Well, I'm learning a lot today, Harper, because also struggle with this. Like as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I struggle with transitions too, because when you are in a certain energy, like I'm sure coaching energy is probably much different than, I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, it's frustrating for those transitions. But I think just having that awareness, and I talk about that a lot, just creating awareness around what is going on in my head right now. When I just came off of this call or doing this thing, or my kid interrupts me while I'm doing this thing, like what's really going on here? Like, what am I really frustrated with? And maybe it's a simple thing of I just need to learn to better regulate my own stress response and be aware of that.
Yeah.
And which is a
Yeah.
challenge and one that I will tell you, one of our counselors, he recommended the 5 senses check-in. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay. So, because I tend to get really high strung and overwhelmed because I tell myself, like, I can do all the things. That's not in scripture. It doesn't go that way. I can do all things. It's not, I can do all the things, but that's where my brain goes, right? Is I can
Yes.
do all the things and I'll just suck it up and, I'll get through it until I can't, until I freak out. And then I start running around the house and yelling at everyone for not getting their tasks done and blah, 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 right?
Yes, yes. I know this. I know that. I live
Right.
this story.
Right. Right. It's very common. And so he was helping me through just being able to recognize before I have my freak out when I'm starting to feel that tension rise and being able to proactively ask for or just take time to go be still, to be still with the Lord, not even praying, just being there and being like, Lord, you're here and I'm here and we're just going to sit here, right, and calm down. But so the five senses is where you check in with your five senses. So you say, like, I see five things in the room. I hear these four sounds. I can smell these three things. I'm touching these two things, and I can taste this one thing. And so what it does is it helps you to go from the overwhelm of in your brain to back into your body and out of your fight or flight. Yeah, out of your fight or flight and back into your conscious brain thinking. So then you can do more of that self-reflection of, like, why am I feeling this way right now? Like, it's probably not because there's a sock on the floor. So that does drive me insane. It's probably because I've been running on all cylinders all day and I had a lot of coffee and I didn't actually take any time to rest or create that margin or, what have you. So yeah. So you'll have to do the five senses check-in. So I will say I did it one time and I was really frustrated because I waited way too long and I'm like, I hear my five kids screaming and I can taste it. I was like, I don't think that's how it's supposed to go. But I had a good laugh over myself. So that was good. But all right, well, we're coming to the end here. Is there anything else that you would say to women who are living in the lives that we have, right? They're often chaotic, but, with kids and wanting to grow, what is something that you would say to women who really want to grow beyond their current level of thinking?
What's the one thing I would say? I would say that you can and you should. And that doesn't take away from where you're showing up at home. It really will only benefit how you show up in your family when you grow in ways outside of that. It will only benefit the way that you show up there.
I love that, Harper, because I think that it's a lie we're told, right? That you can either be fully present with your family as a mom and a wife, or you can do other things, right? Like,
right. Well, that's a whole nother podcast.
I know, that's a whole nother podcast. The both and life. Yes, I would love to have you back. But this has been so good. Harper, how can people connect with you? Instagram, Facebook, what?
Instagram is a great place, at Guerra Health. And I am actually working on, in the next couple months, starting a community for moms who are in this season where they can encourage one another on Facebook. And I'll give you that link so you can post it when it's ready. But really working on this idea of those of us who, like you said, we're told this lot, you're either here or you're there, but we're here and we're growing and we're thriving and it's benefiting both sides. So really being able to just have a community where like-minded women can encourage one another, and whether it's with things like this that we're sharing and like practical ideas of creating margin, and going through that. So working on that, but that's not ready yet, but I will definitely share it when it is. But for now, there'll be stuff about that on Instagram. So yeah,
okay. All right. Well, I'm super excited. Guys, go follow Harper, learn from her, and let's all live this chaotic life together, intentionally creating margin and not being fazed by the things the world tells us, but getting out there and playing bigger and living bigger, and all the boats will rise.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
Chelsey.
Harper.